Welcome students in today's lecture. This is lecture 1 from unit number 2. In this lecture, we are going to discuss in detail about the economic environment. As far as unit 2nd is concerned, all these are the topics which are covered by unit 2. But in this lecture, we will discuss in detail about the economic environment. What is economic environment? Economic environment refers to all those economic factors which have a bearing on the functioning of a business. If you want to go into the detail of the economic environment, so there are few characteristics which are associated with the economic environment. It includes the nature of the economy, the structure of the economy, economic policies and economic conditions. While the first characteristics talks about the nature of the economy, it is the general level of the development of the economy. Maybe that you have heard that there is a developing economy, there are underdeveloped economies and there may be the developed economies. So the status or the level of the development of the economy is represented by the per capita income level of that economy. If we want to classify the low income, high income and middle income economies, so we have the base as the per capita income and this base is given by the World Bank. Let us first understand about the low income economies. All economies with very low per capita income are called as the low income economies. All economies with per capita income of $1,035 or less in 2020 are regarded as low income economies. For example, Afghanistan and Nepal. If you will go in detail about the $1,035, the value of the dollar is rupees 73 today. So, if we will go with the value of $1,035 in rupees, it comes as some around 75,609 rupees. So, the people in the country, those who have the income or the per capita income of rupees 75,000 or less, so they are covered by the nations which are called as the low income economies. The examples of these kind of economies may be Afghanistan and Nepal. Then the high income economies. All the economies with rich per capita income are called as the high income economies. The economies with per capita income with $12,535 or above in 2020 fall under this category. If you will multiply $12,535 again with 73, so it will come as some around 9,15,714 rupees. So, if the income level of the people in the nation is about 9,15,000 or above, so they are considered as the citizens of the country, those who are the high income economies. The examples are USA, UK, Japan, Italy, France, etc. Then comes the middle income economies. These economies fall between the low and high income economies. There are two categories of the middle income economies, lower middle income economies and the upper middle income economies. The economies with a per capita income between $1,036 to $4,045 in 2020 are the lower middle income economies. If you will take our own country, so we come under this category, that is the lower middle income economies. Kenya, Bangladesh, Myanmar are the other examples of the countries, those who come under the lower middle income economies. Then the upper middle income economies. In the economies where the people have the per capita income in between $4,046 to $12,535 in 2020, they are considered as the upper middle income economies. The examples of upper middle income economies includes China, Brazil, Malaysia. So this is all about the nature of the economy. So the nature of the economy depicts the general level of the development of the economy. The second important component that comes in the economic environment is the structure of the economy, that how the economy of that particular country is structured. The structure of the economy may be defined as the contribution of different sectors in that economy. There may be mainly three sectors named as primary sector, secondary sector and tertiary sector. Primary sector is the sector in which the activities are dependent on the natural resources or the earth's resources such as land, water, vegetation, building materials and minerals. The secondary sector includes the industrial and the manufacturing sector, and it add value to the natural resources by transforming raw materials into the valuable products. Let us take an example of a shirt. If you have purchased a shirt, that shirt is manufactured from cloth, and from the where the cloth has come? Cloth has come from the cotton. So cotton is produced with the help of the primary sector, that is a natural resource. This is the activity of the primary sector. When the cotton is ready, it is converted into the raw material, that is a cloth, and that is the work of the secondary sector. And when again that cloth is converted into a shirt, so that again is the task of the secondary sector. And while the primary sector and the secondary sector works in their areas, there are certain sectors that helps these both of these sectors in their activities, like for example the transport facilities, communication facilities, trade facilities. If the raw material is to be sent, like raw material is to be purchased by the vendors, then they will take the help of the transportation. So the kind of the support in the production and exchange of the goods and the services, the various facilities are involved into it, like trade, transport and communication. So these facilities comes under the tertiary sectors. Even sometimes the companies used to just take the loans from the banks, like they used to take the services from the various traders. So all the, like you can say, all the production involves the provision of the services, which are again very much important for the proper functioning of the primary sector and the secondary sector. So this is called as the tertiary sector. Then comes, so this is all about the structure of the economy. Maybe that you have also heard about SME, that is the small and medium scale industries. So if you want to understand about the small and medium scale enterprises, they may be understood in India as enterprises where the investment in plant and machinery or equipment is between rupees 20 lakhs to rupees 10 crores in case of a manufacturing industry, and the same investment is in between rupees 10 lakh to rupees 5 crores in case of a service sector enterprises. So the investment level depicts the status of any kind of the enterprise. So there may be the SME also. So this is all the structure of the economy. Sometimes the structure of the economy also impacts the business activities. Then the economic policy. This is the third important component which is very important to discuss when we are discussing about the economic environment. Economic policy refers to the actions that government takes in the economic field. It covers the systems for setting interest rates and government budget, as well as the labor market, national ownership and many other areas of government interventions into the economy. This is the policy in which there is a government intervention. There may be various kinds of the economic policies. It may include monetary policy, fiscal policy and other economic policies. Let us first understand about the monetary policy. Monetary policy is an economic policy that manages the size and growth rate of the money supply in an economy. This is the policy which is a function of the central bank, that is the Reserve Bank of India. It is the policy which is prepared by the central bank of the country, and it is a policy that decides about the interest rate, money supply and availability of credit in the nation. It is through the monetary policy that RBI controls inflation in the country. RBI uses various instruments while managing the money supply in the economy with the use of repo rate, reverse repo rate, SLR and CRR. These are the few instruments with the help of which RBI always tries to just check the money supply in the economy. The monetary policy can be an expansionary or contractionary policy. An expansionary monetary policy is focused on expanding the money supply in an economy, while a contractionary monetary policy is focused on decreasing the money supply in an economy. Can you imagine, like whenever the money supply in an economy would be lower, so it will impact the earning power of the people, it will impact the standard of living of the people. Similarly, if there would be an expansionary monetary policy, that the money supply in an economy would be more, so in that case, because the money is available in the economy, money supply is there in the economy, so the people will have the great purchasing power, they will just be able to purchase all the things and their standard of living may be high. Let us just understand in detail about the 4-5 important instruments which are related with the monetary policy. The first is the cash reserve ratio, the second is statutory liquidity ratio, the third is repo, and the fourth is reverse repo rate. One of the primary functions of RBI is to control the supply of money in the economy. Somebody has said that excess of everything is bad. So same is the thing that is applicable here, like the supply of money, if it would be more, then it will create the problems in the economy. But if the supply of money would be less in the economy, then again it would create the problem. So there must be something with the help of which we can maintain the balance of this money supply in the economy. So there are few instruments which are available with the RBI, with the help of which they can just have a proper balance in the money supply in the economy. To control inflation and the growth, RBI uses certain tools like cash reserve ratio, statutory liquidity ratio, repo rate and reverse repo rate. Let us first understand what is CRR. It is the ratio of deposits which banks have to keep with the RBI. Under CRR, a certain percentage of the total bank deposits has to be kept in the current account with the RBI. Banks, they do not earn anything on that. Even they will not have access to this amount. They cannot use this money for any of their economic or commercial activities. Banks can't lend this portion of money to corporate or individual borrowers. Let us just understand it with the help of an example. Supposingly you deposit say rupees 1000 in your bank, then the bank receives rupees 1000 from you, and if the CRR rate at that time is 6%, so the bank is required, the 6% of rupees 1000 is come as rupees 60, and the bank is required to deposit rupees 60 with the RBI, and the bank will only be left with the amount rupees, that is rupees 940. This bank, like they are under the requirement to deposit rupees 60 as the CRR. Even the bank cannot use this money, they have to put it in the current account with the RBI. This rupees 60 is deposited, and this is the money which the bank cannot touch for any kind of the activities. Now if the RBI cuts CRR, then it means bank will be left with more money to lend or to invest, and then the banks will provide the loans to the like general public at the lesser rate of the interest, and there would be the more money supply in the economy. So this is the CRR that helps in controlling the money supply or the circulation of the money in the economy. The second important instrument is named as SLR, that is the statutory liquidity ratio. Besides CRR, banks are required to invest certain percentage of their deposits in the specified financial securities, which are the central government or state government securities. For example, let us again take the example, you deposit say rupees 1000 in your bank. The bank receives rupees 1000 and the SLR rate at that time is 20%. So that means the bank is under the requirement to invest 20% of the deposits in the SLR. That means 20% of 1000 comes as rupees 800. So it is the obligation of a bank to just deposit rupees 100 in the government securities only. So if you will take into consideration both of the first and the second instrument, that is CRR and SLR, out of 1000 rupees, rupees 60 as CRR and rupees 200 as SLR, the banks are required to just do with this amount as has been suggested by the monetary policy or by RBI to them. That means rupees 200 plus rupees 60, they have to just go with the kind of the ways whatever was suggested by the RBI to them, and the bank only has the money now, like which is the rest of the amount. If you will less these 260 rupees 1000, so you will get like 740 rupees. So this is the amount that the bank can invest by its own, like wherever it want to invest it, they can invest it. Now the third instrument that is there with the RBI is the repo rate. Sometimes when we need money, we take loan from banks, and bank charge interest rate from us, and this is called as the cost of the credit. Similarly, if the bank need the money, they approach the central bank, that is the Reserve Bank of India. And the Reserve Bank of India, even they do not give the loan to the banks in free, they charge some interest, and that interest may be called as the repo rate. The banks or the central bank usually charge the interest, plus the banks are required to pledge their securities with the central bank. So this is the way that the commercial banks can take the loans from the Reserve Bank of India. It simply, if we talk about the repo rate, it simply means the rate at which RBI lends money to the commercial banks against the pledge of the government securities, where the banks are in the needs of the funds to meet their day-to-day obligations. Banks enter into an agreement with the RBI to repurchase the same pledged government securities at a future date at a predetermined price. For example, if the repo rate is 5% and bank takes loan of rupees 1000 from RBI, they will pay interest of rupees 50 to RBI. So this is called as repo rate. The fourth instrument that is available with the RBI or in the monetary policy is named as reverse repo rate. Sometimes it may also happen that the commercial banks have the surplus money with them, and they are not able to invest it in the good options, so they want to just give it to the RBI. So RBI used to take this money from the banks, but on that amount the RBI pays interest to the commercial banks, and this is called as the reverse repo rate. These are the four powerful instruments which really work in the control of the money supply in an economy. If you will see the current rate of CRR, SLR, repo and reverse repo rate, the current rates as in Feb 2020 is like CRR is 4%, SLR is 18.25%, repo rate is 5.15%, and reverse repo rate is 4.9%. Now how these four instruments impact the money supply? Here you can see, like if the CRR, SLR and the repo rates would be cut, so it means that like the banks are required to just pay the less amount in the form of CRR to the central bank. They are required to invest the less amount of the money in the SLR. Even they can take the loans at a lesser rates, interest rates from the Reserve Bank of India. So this is somehow just giving the more money supply in the economy. This is somehow generating the more money for the commercial banks, and when the commercial banks have more of the money available with them, they lend that money at the lesser cost of the credit, that is the interest rate. They used to charge less money from the general public, and when the general public have the loans available at the lesser rates, they used to take more number of loans from the banks. That means like their standard of living, they may increase with the help of the loans. There would be more money supply in the economy, there would be more circulation of the money in the economy, and that will result in growth, liquidity and the good purchasing power. So this is somehow that how monetary policy impacts the money circulation in the economy. I hope now it is very much clear to all the students that how the monetary policy works in an economy. Now the second important economic policy, again which is the government role, is called as the fiscal policy. This is a policy which is again prepared by the government of the country. It refers to the policy of the government regarding taxation, public expenditure and public debt. Maybe that you have seen that there is a lot of development activity that is going on, like construction of the roads, canals, bridges, peripherals, lot of things are going on. So this is all about the expenditure that the government is doing. Can you imagine from where the government is getting the funds for all this? This is like there are a lot of the sources of revenue for the government, and from where the government gets the source or the revenues, that is all decided by the policies like the fiscal policies. Fiscal policy is basically dependent on the budget of any country. When we talk about the budget, like the fiscal policy operates through the budget, and budget is an estimate of government expenditure and revenue for a particular financial year. The budget is presented to the parliament yearly by the union finance minister. The objectives of the fiscal policy are as follows. First, the budget approval is a big exercise, as without budget no tax can be levied, no expenditure can be incurred, and government can spend only on approved items. So the base of the fiscal policy is the union budget. Even there may be the state budget also. When the state government also prepares and presents a budget in the state assembly, so that may be called as the state budget. Following are the objectives of the fiscal policy: accelerating the rate of investment, promoting the socially desirable investment, achieving rapid economic development, achieving full employment, promoting the foreign trade, reducing inequalities of income, and establishing a welfare state. There are three components of the fiscal policy. It may include government receipts, government expenditure, and public debt. Let us first understand the government receipts, from where the government is getting the money to just spend it on the development of their nation. The first source is the revenue receipt, the second is the capital receipt. Revenue receipt includes the tax revenue. The government gets the revenue from the direct tax and the indirect tax. Then there is a non-tax revenue also, like for various things the general public or even the industrialists, they are required to take the license and the permissions, and for which they have to pay the fees to the government. So that is a non-tax revenue source for the government. Even sometimes whenever anybody contradicts or anybody just they do not follow the government rules and regulations, so like fines and penalties as a punitive measure are there, and they are imposed on the people, those who are the defaulters. So this is also one of the source of non-tax revenue for the government. As far as capital receipts are concerned, it may include the loans recovery, disinvestments by the government in their undertakings or in their industries, and then there may be the borrowing and other liabilities. Then government expenditure again includes two kinds of the expenditure. It may include revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. Revenue expenditure, it is a recurring expenditure that comes and goes, that comes again and again. It includes interest payments, defense expenses. Government is required to pay interest to the people if they have taken any money from the general public in the forms of bonds and all. They are required to pay the defense expenses, like the expenses on arms and ammunition is must for the safety and welfare of the economy and the country. Then salaries to the central government employees, these all are the revenue expenditure. Capital expenditure are basically of a non-recurring nature, and they include the loan repayments and loans to the public enterprises. So this is all about that where how the government spends and where the like source of money is there for the government which is available, and it is the fiscal policy that derives the source of money and the source of expenditure for the government. So that's why the fiscal policies plays a crucial role. It gives an idea to the whole economy that how much money is going to be going to take a form of an expenditure by the government, and from where they are going to do these expenses like expenditures, what would be the source of revenue for the government. So this is the kind of a homework, kind of a plan which is available with the government, and they do their work on this plan every year, and it is the basically the function of the government, and the main role is played in this, like it is always the kind of a plan which is presented by the parliament yearly by the union finance minister, it is presented. So this is the fiscal policy. Then there are few other economic policies also, like industrial policy. Industrial policy is a statement which defines the role of government in the industrial development. It defines the place of the public and the private sectors in industrialization of the country, with the relative role of large and small industries. Time to time there are lots of the announcements which are done by the government in relation to the industries. For example, for SMEs, there are a lot of the rules that the government has made like these days. This is just to give a large impetus to the small and medium industries so that they can work well. So while if any industry is there, they have to follow all the rules and the regulations which are given by the government. They cannot go against that rules and procedures which are declared or which are announced by the government in a particular nation. Then the trade policy. Trade policy or international trade policy again is a set of rules and regulations which are intended to change the international trade flows, particularly to restrict imports. Like, can you imagine if there would be no trade policy, so there may be the imports and that may be up to a peak, and if there would be the more of the imports and less of the exports, it will impact the whole economy. It will just disturb the status of the economy in terms of the flow of capital. So that's why, to restrict that imports or even just to have a check on the exports, there is a policy that is always announced yearly by the government, and that may be called as a trade policy. There are a lot of the policies that comes under the trade policy. It includes restrictive import policy, and it may include the EXIM policy, that is the export and import policy. Like, EXIM policy is introduced in a period of 5 years by the government, and lot of the things are introduced in that policy. The intention behind the policy is just to make the provisions with which there may be a proper check on the import and the export level of a particular nation. Then foreign exchange policy. It is the policy in respect of cross-border movements of capital. Like, liberalized exchange policy encourages movement of capital within the country, which can lead to the development of the economy. Then there may be foreign investment and technology policy. Like, a foreign investment policy again is a government regulation or law that encourages or discourages foreign investment in the local economy. So whatever the rules and procedures that have been designed or like announced by the government of a particular nation in terms of the foreign investment, all the foreign like companies, they are under the requirement to follow them. Even when we talk about the technology policy, there may be restrictive technology policy. That means if the government has put a restriction on the technology, any particular technology that is from a particular country, so for that technology the foreigners cannot just give that technology in the nation in which there is a restriction that is put by the government of that nation. So that's why foreign investment and technology policy also governs the rules of doing the business in the at the international level. So there may be these policies also which one should just have a look while if they are going to do business at the local level or at the international level. So while the third component of the economic environment we have covered, the fourth is the economic conditions. Generally, the economic condition of the country may be good or may be bad. Economic conditions change over time, and it is also dependent upon the business cycle. When the economy goes through expansion, so it may be called as a good stage or the good economic condition, but when the economy goes through contraction, so it shows that there is some negativity, and the economy is not in a good condition. Economic conditions are considered to be sound or positive when the economy is expanding, but it is negative or considered as negative when an economy is contracting. A country's economic conditions are influenced by various macroeconomic and microeconomic factors. It includes the income level of the people of that particular country, the distribution of income in that country, the GDP trends, like the whole domestic, like you can say the product and services, whatever has been produced in a particular year, or whatever the work has been done in a particular year, that may show the GDP trend of that country. Then sectoral growth trends, demand and supply trends, price trends, unemployment levels, trade and balance of payment trends. All these are the various things that depicts the actual condition of any particular economy. So the economy may be at the expanding form or it may take the contracting form. So expansion is always advisable, because if the economy is expanding, so it is always considered as a positive sign. Then the next important thing which is really important to cover in the economic environment is the economic system. An economic system may be referred to as a system that encompasses the methods of production, distribution and exchange of goods and services in a particular economy. There may be three kind of the economic systems. It may be capitalistic system, socialistic system and mixed economic system. For our country, India, we have the mixed economy system. So let us understand one by one all these three kinds of the economic systems. First is called as the capitalistic economy. The kind of the economies in which the industries, trade and production are completely owned by the private bodies. There is no intervention of the government, or there is a free market economy. So that may be called as a capitalistic economy. Means whenever the trade, production, industries are totally completely controlled by the private stakeholders or the private bodies. So that may be called as the capitalistic economy. This type of economy involves no governmental interference. The examples of the capitalistic economy includes Germany, US. The production task of a capitalistic economy is completely controlled by the firms and the industries. There is no role of the government into that. There are a lot of the features of the capitalistic economy. The most of the property like factories, machines, equipments are owned by the private individuals and the companies. There is a freedom, total freedom to the enterprises. They can just work with their own rules and regulations. There is no intervention from the government side. The main motive of these kind of the economies is to earn more and more profit. Price mechanism. Under this system, the demand and supply in the market will determine the production level and correspondingly the price set for the products without any kind of the government involvement. So it all depends on the demand and supply. If the demand for the product is the more, then the price would also be more. But there would be no government interference in terms of the price mechanism, like there would be no government interference while setting the prices of any products. Then consumer is a king in the case of the capitalistic economies. It is all about the consumer sovereignty. In this, the market is controlled by the demands of the consumers. So it all depends on the likes and dislikes of the consumers, that what they are liking or what they are disliking in terms of the products and the services. There is a concept of free trade. There exist low tariff barriers and it promotes the international trade at the highest. Then government interference. In a capitalistic economy, there is no government interference in the daily activities of the business. There is more flexibility in the labor markets and there is a freedom of the ownership. Anyone as an individual can have the property and they can just use it as per their own. After the death of that person, the same property is passed on to his successors by the right of the inheritance. So there is no government intervention at all in the case of the capitalistic economy. The second is the socialistic economy. These are the kind of the economies or the system in which the economic system is controlled and regulated by the government so as to ensure the welfare and equal opportunity to the people of a society. There are a lot of the features of the socialistic economy. There is a collective ownership. All means of production are owned by the government and no individual can hold private property beyond a certain limit. Therefore, it is only the government who utilizes the resources in the interest of the social welfare. Then the government always tries to have the economic, social and the political equality. There is very less discrimination, or even you can say no discrimination in between the rich and poor in the case of the socialistic economies. There is always economic planning in the case of the socialistic economic system. Under socialism, government fixes certain objectives and in order to achieve these objectives, government adopts economic planning. All types of decisions regarding the central problems of an economy are taken in the economic plans. There is a central planning authority who plans for the whole economy. There is no competition because it is the state, it is the government that is the sole entrepreneur in the case of the socialism. Government plays a crucial and a positive role. They try to just work for the welfare of the whole economy and accordingly they make the policies in relation to consumption, investment, foreign trade, always keeping in mind the interest of the general public. The government makes the policies in all these areas. Works and wages are provided to the people according to their ability and their needs. So there is very less place for discrimination among the people while if they are living into the socialistic system. Then there is always a maximum social welfare. The sole objective of socialism is the maximum social welfare of the society. It means there is no scope of exploitation for the labor class. Government keeps a close eye on the needs of the poor masses while formulating the plans. So this is all about the socialistic economy, and then comes the mixed economy. Mixed economic system is a system that combines aspects of both capitalism and socialism. Mixed economic system protects private property and allows a level of economic freedom in the use of capital, but also allows for government to interfere in the economic activities in order to achieve social aims. Like in India, we have the mixed economic system. There are few features of mixed economic system. The first is the coexistence of the public and the private sectors. In the case of the mixed economic systems, the heavy industries like defense equipment, atomic energy, heavy engineering industries come under the control of the private sector, while on the other hand the consumer goods, small and cottage industries, agriculture, etc. are assigned to the private sector. The government helps the private sector by providing several facilities of their development. Then, economic welfare. Public sector seeks to avoid regional inequalities. They provide larger employment opportunities. Often its price policy is guided by the considerations of the economic welfare rather than by the profit motive. Private activities are all influenced through monetary and fiscal policy. If even the private sector or the private companies are there, they are highly influenced by the monetary and fiscal policies, and they have to follow them to the fullest if they are the part of the mixed economic system. Then economic planning. In mixed economy, the government adopts the instrument of the economic planning. This is necessary for the public sectors which have to work according to the some plan and to achieve the predetermined objectives. In the private sector again, they cannot be left out without to work in their own way. They simply have to go, and they are always influenced by the economic plans which are made by the government. There is a free and controlled economic development. The beauty of the mixed economic system is that there is a government intervention, but at the other hand the government is giving some flexibility also to the private sector, that they can also come and can do the economic activities into the market. So encouragement is given to the free economic activities, but at the same time steps are also taken to control the economic activities by the government. So it is a mixed scope, it has a mixed scope, like there is a social welfare of the public in the economy, and there is more of the economic activity also in the economy with the help of the private sector. So that's why mixed economic system is one of the best way to run the economy and to have the good economic activities under any system. Then the economic legislation. There are certain laws, economic laws, which are required to be followed by any organization if they are working in that particular nation. For example, in India, we have the MRTP Act. Various new and large business organizations have entered the Indian trade market after the independence. The level of competition was not extreme, hence they tried to establish their monopoly, so that they cannot take the otherwise benefit, or they cannot just take the exploit the resources of our nation while attaining the profit for their own purpose. There was an act that was introduced as the MRTP Act and named as Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act. The intention of the business organizations are not hidden from the eyes of the Indian government. Most of the organizations, even the foreign companies, they always try to set their monopoly, and they always try to, sometimes they always try to take the benefit, most of the profits and the benefits from the foreign nations like India. So in that case, so that they cannot take the extraordinary benefit, or they cannot exploit the local markets, there is an act which was introduced and which is named as the MRTP Act. This bill was passed for protecting the consumer's interest, which eventually resulted in the emergence of the MRTP Act, and it came in the year 1969. This law empowered the MRTP Commission to close down all those firms and organizations which attempted to hinder or get in the way of the healthy competition. If any organization tries to bring out the monopoly, and if they will just restrict the competition, in that case they would not be eligible to do the business in India. So this was the objective of the MRTP, and it is to safeguard the rights of the consumers. because whenever there would be a monopoly, so it may exploit the interest of the consumers and the general public. The companies may charge the money as they wish, so to affect, and it may affect adversely the interest of the whole nation and the general public. So to avoid all these kind of the disturbances, MRTP Act is introduced with the following objectives: to regulate and control the build up of the financial power, to curb monopoly and dominant practices of trade until they prove to be helpful for the people, to restrict unfair trade practices. If anybody is involved or indulged in any kind of the activities like cartel and all, so that even is not allowed, and it is properly given under the MRTP Act as the practice which is not like under as per the laws. Like there are a lot of the practices which are named as the unfair practices, unfair trade practices, and the restrictive trade practices. Any kind of the practice which includes black marketing or which is restricting the competition, it is against the law and is against the law, rules and procedures, and no company would be allowed to do this. So this is the act that regulates the competition in the country, that regulates the trade practices in the country. Then the second law again, which is very important to understand, is named as FARA. It came in the year 1973. Earlier it was named as a Foreign Exchange Regulation Act, but it was renamed as FEMA, that was Foreign Exchange Management Act. In 1973, FARA was passed. It put very strict regulations on specific form of payments, securities and dealings that had a negative impact on the export and import of currency and foreign exchange. The FARA bill was framed in order to regulate foreign exchange and payments. At the time when the foreign exchange reserves in India were low, the FARA was introduced. The foreign exchange became rare. Hence, FARA assumed that the Indian government was the rightful owner of all the foreign exchange earned by the resident of India. Therefore, it had to be accumulated and given to the RBI. Supposingly, if you have also earned some money in the foreign country, and so whatever you have earned, so there is some share of the government also into that, and the government is also the rightful owner. So the rules related to the foreign exchange all are all covered by this act named as FARA. It like we can say that the transactions, there are a lot of the transactions which are restricted by the RBI and which are not allowed under FARA. The objective of the FARA are to regulate the foreign payments, to regulate the transactions in securities and foreign exchange, to consume foreign exchange for India, so that nobody can dominate, nobody can just do anything wrong in relation to the foreign exchange. There are a lot of the rules, regulations and procedures which are declared and announced under a particular roof, and that roof is named as the FARA. It is named as Foreign Exchange Regulation Act. Earlier it was FARA, but it was renamed as FEMA. It came in the year 1999. It was brought to replace the FARA Act. The purpose of FARA was to regulate the conduct of the business of Indian companies in foreign markets and foreign companies in the Indian markets, but FEMA was brought into effect from January 1, 2000, and this act applies to every office, branch or agency in India, and also to the foreign office and branches of people who are the Indian residents. FEMA was framed by Indian government and is directly associated with the FDI in the economy. FEMA has a crucial role to play in facilitating external payments and trade. It includes all the rules related to the foreign exchange or the flow of the foreign currency. This is the act that consolidates and amends the law relating to the foreign exchange with the objective of facilitating the external trade and the payments, and for promoting the orderly development and maintenance of foreign exchange market in India. The objectives of FEMA are to amend and consolidate FARA, to assist in external payments and trade, to facilitate the systematic development of the Indian foreign exchange market. So this is again the act that helps the traders, those who are going to do the trade at the international level. Lot of the rules and regulations are there, so they have to study this act in detail while they are dealing into the foreign countries. So whatever the earnings would be there, so there are a lot of the rules and regulations which are related or associated with that. So this is the act that is guiding both the foreign traders if they are coming in our place like India, and it is just governing the even the Indian traders also if they are the Indian residents and doing business in the foreign countries. So this is the act that covers lot of the rules in relation to the flow of the foreign currency or in relation to the foreign exchange. So this is all about the economic environment. In this lecture we discussed in detail about the economic environment, and I believe now it is clear to you all that how the economic environment may impact or influences the business transactions, and it may influence the traders at the local or the international level. So that is all for this lecture. We'll meet again with a like socio-cultural environment in our next lecture, that would be lecture number 2. Thank you. Jai Hind.